Margaret Agard, welcome to the Bookaholic podcast.
Hi, Deirdre. I've been looking forward to this. Yep. Very
Yes, yes,
excited.
and so have I. And we're going to go ahead and mention your books. In His Footsteps is one of your books, and
Well,
To-Do
they're all
List.
in his footsteps, kind of like
Okay,
a series, but well, not a series, but like a series. Yes.
right, right. Okay,
Yeah,
so they're all like it start off in His Footsteps.
that's right.
And what I want you to do is to take a step back and you'll probably be speaking to a lot of believers, and believers will know what you're talking about once you start in.
Okay.
But I'm going to challenge you to speak to the unbelievers. How can you reach the unbelievers with your what we're getting ready to talk about?
I just use words that resonate. So if, like a 12-step program, I'll simply talk about a higher power or how you connect. And for some people, it's, like I'm not even sure I have a higher power, but they often have a sense of an intuition
Mm-hmm.
or this, I just knew this was the right thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's now, since I'm going to talk about some specifics, that might not work quite as well, although it can. I think you're connecting to, God, but maybe haven't learned the term for that.
Right, right. Well, we just want everybody to be able to get a lot out of what you're going to be speaking of today, because one of the things that you're going to be speaking about today, we all have, whether you're a believer or not a believer, and is a to-do list.
Yes.
And to-do list, as much as it seems like you're kind of organized, that you have the to-do list and you check it off and all of these type of things, it can also be, excuse to use a word, a damning type of thing, to make you think like, oh my gosh, I've got so much to do, I'm so overwhelmed, and all of this stuff. So let's talk about the In His Footsteps. You gave your to-do list to God. Please tell us what that is, how that started, the whole journey to it, and what we can do to turn over our terrible to-do lists to God.
It's interesting because sometimes I say it to people and they're like, oh, I don't have enough time for that. Well, that's why I started it. So what happened
Yeah.
is in my mid 40s, I was a single mom and sole
Okay.
financial support for 8 children. Actually, at that point, two were had moved out, so I had 6 still at home, and 3 or 4 were in college, and 3 were in high school, junior high. And I was an executive in the high tech industry. That's how afforded I could feed them. So,
Right. Yeah.
and
I was going to.
yeah, and the high tech industry when I first started, especially PC based products, were you just had to be smart, and I'm smart in math. I'm not going to say I'm smart in everything, but I am smart in math and that kind of
Yeah.
thinking. And
Right.
so then they were all going public, and as an executive, you had to have some bona fides, like.
Right.
And so I decided I still had a year left to finish my degree. So I decided to go back to school full time and just like pound that thing out. And so, yeah, so here I am, a single mom, sole financial support, executive in the high tech industry, and I'm going to school, university full time. And any one of those would have been a full time job.
Right.
So I knew how to set priorities. I knew the whole Stephen Covey quadrants and your A, B, and C list and da da da.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I did that, but it wasn't working
Yeah.
because so much of it was priority. And often I would do something only to find out it didn't need to be done. So this was all in the, when was this? In the 90s. And
Okay.
so you weren't going to school online,
Right.
turn in a paper or take a test. You showed up. And
That's
I would show up prepared with a paper or for a test, and there'd be a note on the door that the professor was sick or something had happened and
right.
it was going to be postponed.
Right. Right.
And I was only getting like 4 hours sleep a night trying to handle all this and just
Right.
was exhausted. And I think if I had known there's something else I could have done in the time I spent preparing for the test or the paper, or I'd go to
Yeah.
a client and the client would be like, oh, you know what? we're going to change that. So thanks for doing that proposal, but now let's relook at the whole thing. And I think, yeah, okay, again, I spent hours and I didn't have to. And so I thought, if I just knew the future, I'd know what to do, right? And then I thought, oh, well, I know who does know the future.
Yes.
So that's
Correct.
how it started. And when I first started doing it, I simply would take, like, I have this to-do list. I mean, I don't know if this, like, it would look like this. Now, this is like a month's worth of stuff here, but that would be half a day. And,
Yes.
and I would say, I would just take that. Here's my list. And I would go to God and I'd say, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Because I clearly can't do all this.
Right.
And I would just look at it. And since I was experienced at hearing the still small voice, that whole thing, right? I would just think, okay, I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this. And then I would have a thought, but do this other thing.
Right.
And I think, okay. And I realized as I was doing that this was how I was turning my life over to God. People are like, I want to turn my life over to God. Well, give me your to-do list, because guess what? That's your life. And and a lot of times what got added was something like, call this friend or a cousin, or just a thought would come, call this person, or take a meal by. And that's the kind of thing that would get added. But sometimes it was something big, like change your minor. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Change your minor. And that would later in the future that worked out. But I'm saying this because that's how I did it. It was, what do I have to do?
Right.
And within a few weeks, I mean, I don't even think it took 2 weeks. It was all under control. I was finished every night by 8:00. I was so sure that someone was in control, that and I lived in the DC area, which is like supposedly the second worst traffic. Like, it didn't matter what time. You could say, okay, I'm going to give myself, it's a half hour away, but unless 2 tractor trailers fall over, it could take an hour and a half. So I always allowed more time than I needed. I was never on time. I was either early or late. But if I was running late, instead of getting all hyper and upset, I would think, well, God knew this was going to happen. So it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And it would be fine. They would be late too, or something had happened. I was so calm once I started doing that. And it was so, the things I didn't really need to be doing, I didn't do. Or I would take care of things and I would add the things that God or spirit or whatever you call it, the universe, wanted me to do. And I would often find the things I had been praying for came as a result of that. Or it was like, he had my back. Like, you did this, guess what? Here's a little gift.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, then of course I took it back, because Deirdre, it just seemed like I was being micromanaged and I was weak because I couldn't even get through my day like that, right? And so I thought I was taking that back. And of course, I ended up worse than before. But this time, when I gave it over again, the question changed a little bit. It became, what do you want me to do today?
Yes. Exactly.
And it was like, well, I was praying at this time, and I was just newly divorced, and my husband had come out as gay, and I was like, I just need a friend. I just need a friend, someone who just really gets me, and I get her, and I would like a huggy one. That's what I said. I'd like a huggy friend. And that was about it. And it was one day, it was like, take this meal to this much younger, 15-year younger woman that I knew at church, kind of, but not really. And I did. And she writes about that. I had forgotten that's how we met. But then we started helping other people together. We started going out to do things for other people. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my gosh, this is my friend that I prayed for. And the kind of friend, like your third grade best friend, except we had money and could drive. And we're like, yes. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. So,
wow. Well, I find that, Margaret, what you're saying is very true. that when we really give God the control and trust, that things always work out. Now this is believer to believer, and I don't know if people can't relate to it. Maybe we're going to bless someone to try to become a believer through this discussion. But I find that when you put your trust in God, whatever it is, from a to-do list, which some people would think that's inane. How do you turn over a to-do list to God? He's not going to type your paper or read it. I can just hear some people saying something
Oh,
like that.
yeah, he didn't
And
type my paper, but he did tell me if I didn't need to do it that day.
exactly. As you were speaking, I belong to a local community group, and I was charged with building the website. I had volunteered to do that because I thought the organization didn't have any money to spend on a website. So as a volunteer, I said, well, listen, I'll start the website. And as you get down further down the road and you want to turn this over to a professional company, then you just turn it over, but I'll just get it started.
Right.
So I worked on it. And so I'm working on that for a community group that I belong to. I belong to another community group that I've got to do work for. Of course, I am a business owner. Then
Right.
here I am, a podcaster and
Yeah.
blogger and YouTuber for this. Then, of course, I'm married and I have two grown children, but I have a house. So I've got all these things. I'm a very busy person. I've got all these things going on. Well, in a meeting that I didn't attend, they
Nice.
voted they voted to have a professional company do the website.
Oh, you
And
didn't know.
so, and I wasn't finished though, but I had given it, time. Building a website is not just so much about the things that need to be on the website. It's like a creative concept. So I had to think about the creativity and the colors and all of these things. And it takes time. I'm really good at it and I'm pretty quick, but it takes time.
Yep.
And so then they announced that, and I was like, I was salty, as people say.
Yeah.
Today I was very, very, very salty.
Mhm.
Uh, Totally unchristian, like salty. And I was like, if there's one thing that I totally despise and that I consider the number one pet peeve of mine is don't waste my time. You can almost waste my money before you waste my time because my time is unrecoverable. It can't
Right.
be recovered. And so thank goodness I didn't put as much into it as I could have, but still, I could have been working on this. I could have been working on a whole lot of other things than that. And so I say to you, for me, it just dawned on me, every day that I should start with prayer, even though I might have things written down, but to ask God, hey, give me some direction of what I need to do today. That's going to be
Right.
more important that I can do is if I'm doing this for you, what should I do that's going to make a difference and it's going to bless somebody, even if you think it's just a blog post, that blog post may bless someone. And but anyway, I just thought I'd tell you a little bit of my backstory about my to-do
Yeah.
list and how it blew up. How it blew up one day.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. Some people are like, well, I don't know how to hear that small voice or whatever, or
Yes.
I'm not that kind of believer. But I will say this for believers, this Christian, Well, actually, I was reading the Lord's Prayer again, and it was, thy will be done on earth the way it is in heaven. And I started thinking, do you think in heaven people are just angels are making up their own plans and every once in a while saying, hey, I could use some help here, God? Or do you think they're saying, hey, what do you want me to do today? I'm like committed to what you're committed to, peace on earth and people loving each other, so what do I have to do to be part of that? And the
Yeah.
same way with Christ saying, the Father I have always, because I do always those things that please him. And well, how did he
Right.
know? I'm pretty sure he asked. He'd go
Right.
up and pray, and he'd come down like, oh, we're going to Samaria today. We're like, okay.
Right.
So
Right.
yes. And so
Yeah.
I decided, yes, that was actually very Christian. And I've heard people who are not believers say things like a name will pop in their head of a friend that they hadn't maybe seen since college. And they said, I've
Right.
learned that if I all of a sudden am thinking about someone, I should call that person. I should
Yes.
connect. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. You know, the other day, and I had been delaying and delaying. A person that I'm on a board with, their mother passed away, and then a few days later, their uncle passed away.
Oh,
So that happened. Then another person, a childhood friend, was a brothers that I knew as children. One of the brothers passed away. And then the third thing is that one of my in-laws, and it's a long drawn out in-law scenario, but fell ill and has been ill and had to move in with some family members. And so I sat down on Saturday morning and consciously wrote out two sympathy cards, and kind of like a get well type of card, and sent them out. And I got a response last night that said, this person so appreciated the card that you sent out. I mean, it was just a card, just a little card, possibly one of those 99-cent cards that
right.
you can get. But I did make sure for all three, I didn't just sign my name. I consciously wrote down some things I wanted to say to those people.
Right.
Now, I'm not bragging on myself or anything, but that's the blessing I got by having that on my to-do list on that Saturday morning. That people do appreciate when you take some time out and communicate with them. And I have been thinking about these people for a couple of weeks that these incidences had happened to them. And I said, I've got to send them a card. And, like that's the small voice that you can hear, and I've heard a lot of people that's non-believers say, oh, what does he or she mean that God is speaking to them? They try to make you sound like you're crazy or insane and that you're some kind of
Crazy
raving
good.
nut,
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not how it goes. It's because I have a relationship with God and I'm trying to be in tune, and being in tune is reading the word. Then you'll start to get, and it won't take long if you just go ahead and relax and
Yep.
give yourself the opportunity to be talked to.
And
You can't
people,
be
if someone said to me once, well, I mean, when you're talking back, like, is your mouth moving? I'm like, no, this is like, we all have thoughts in our heads, like, right?
right,
Like the thought, what is she talking about? Well, that's a thought
right,
in your head, right?
right,
And this is a thought. And
right.
we often have contradictory thoughts in our head. So
Yes,
I had to actually say, I don't know how to hear that still small voice. Help me
right,
learn it. And
right.
for me, the thought will come more than once. And it's a
Yes,
good thing. It'll be like,
yes,
invite someone to dinner. No, it doesn't make sense. I just came to dinner. No, invite them to dinner. But the thought will
right,
come again. It
right,
doesn't come to me like someone saying to me, Margaret, do this. It's more like
right,
I'm saying to me, I ought to do this.
right.
And I try to blow it off, and it comes again, and I'll try to blow it off, and then it'll come a third time, and that's when I think, oh, wait, I think this is God. And sometimes I'll say, well, is it you, God?
Right,
Yeah.
right,
And because sometimes it doesn't make sense.
right,
I've
right,
heard someone say, well, I just look around. If someone in front of me needs help, I do it. But more than once, it hasn't been someone in front of me. It
right.
was more a thought that I followed through on, and it was turned out to be exactly what someone needed.
Exactly, exactly. Wonderful, wonderful. So let's talk about your other book. And by the way, these are memoirs. These two
Yes.
books that we're talking about are memoirs. What is the second book?
Okay, well, the first one was how I started giving my to-do list to God, what happened, and things that didn't
Right,
happen right, and my attitude, because it's often bad. Like, I haven't watched a television show in 3 months. I finally sat down, and this woman I've been praying about now calls and asks for help. Like, she couldn't have called some other time, like that, right?
right,
Okay, so I'm not the best, but I do
right,
eventually do it. Yeah, because once I had to and those stories are in the book. This one isn't. It was like, I want you to run to town, and I was trying to can tomatoes.
Right.
No, way off topic. So that's what the first book is about. The second book
Right.
is, oh, let's just give it all to him. And so we sold or gave away everything we had. We stored just a little bit, my husband's tools and a little bit of furniture. And
Right.
we went and worked as missionaries. We ended up in inner Silver City, Albuquerque. We ended up working in the prisons. We ended up, just
Wow.
different things. And it was like, I'm just going to give all day and night
Right.
to whatever.
Right.
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 And
Right.
I was hard, at the end of it, I was like done. And my husband's, let's do another one. I'm like, no, but we did do another one because I really was stretched and it was not comfortable.
Right.
But one of the stories I tell is I kept thinking of things I'd done before that I thought I had repented of and been forgiven of. And I said, I thought I repented of this and been forgiven because I kept thinking of them.
Yeah.
And the Spirit came and said, well, you did, but you haven't repented of the attitudes that caused them.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, so you're thinking like selfish and whiny and lazy? Like maybe I should work on the actual attitudes. Yeah. So, and another time I was like, I kept thinking I should call this woman, and I knew the woman, and we'd been to visit her once, and it was like, can we come again? And she's like, wouldn't pick up her phone. And when we went to visit her, we knew she had children who were disabled. And this was back before, like on your phone, you had the answering thing. She had an answering machine, and people would call and she would just ignore it. And she would click in, but she was there because of these disabled kids. So it would be, you need to call her. And I think, well, about the third time, I'm like, if she wanted to talk to me, she'd pick up.
Right.
So this is probably irritating her.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassing to me. Like, what's the point of this? To have to keep calling someone who's not picking up and not calling me back. And every time I ended the same way, like, if you ever need anything, a number like that, right? And about the fifth time, I'm like, what the is no? Like, clearly you don't get someone saying no, God. Like, what is the deal? I don't want to keep doing this. But and then it would be like that soft voice. Yeah, do it anyway. So all of a sudden, like, I'd called her really once a week for about almost 2 months. And all of a sudden she called me out of the blue. Yeah. And she said she'd gone in for some day surgery and her husband was out of town. This is when we were in Alaska. And he couldn't get back because planes weren't flying. When something goes wrong, you're not leaving where you are in Alaska. And her kids were going to be coming home from school. Something had gone wrong with the surgery. She was going to have to stay overnight. And someone just needed to get to that house to take care of her kids. And so, of course, we were able to take care of it. And it was only later I thought, what if I'd only called once? 2 months
and let it go. Oh, she didn't call, I didn't reach her, so.
Yeah. But 8 messages all saying the same thing. If you ever need help, call me. Here's the number. That's the kind of thing that says to me, there's a God. Or you call it what you want. And I can tune into that. And I can make the world a better place. And I don't have to go be Mother Teresa. I might have to make 8 phone calls that I think are kind of embarrassing to make.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Exactly. But it all worked out in the end.
Yes. And what I learned from it. Yeah.
Right. As with everything that's God directed, it all works out in the end. Now, so what is the third book you're working on?
It's a little more, I want to say difficult, but I think of it as faith, hope, and charity, right? Like the first was faith to just hand my to-do list over and start acting on it. And what happened as a result. And the second one was about hope. We hoped we could make the world a better place by just being out there to help people. And charity was my relationship with my husband. So the first 2 are kind of short because it was my relationship with God and with what my husband and I were doing, and his name is Parker, in the background. And, it didn't take a lot of writing because one of us was perfect and it wasn't me. But the third one is how we got married. And what had happened is during that same time, in my mid-40s, single mom, and and taking care of these kids, and my husband and the ex-husband has come out as gay, and we're just kind of reeling from all this. And
Yeah.
this thought came from God: you're going to meet the man you're going to marry next fall. And I thought, no, thank you. I don't want to get married again. And I had two. What was going to be left by then is two teenage boys at home, and I could just see a stepfather being thrown into that mix was not going to be good. And so, no, thank you. I can remember saying to my aunt, Donna, I know God thinks he's giving me a gift, but I don't want the gift. And she said, well, how do you know you don't want it? You haven't met it yet. And I thought, well, there's a thought. So I did meet and marry Parker. And it was, if this is what a match made in heaven looks like, we're in trouble. Because, he came from an alcoholic father, abused, very touchy, very and I would say he doesn't trust people to do anything right. He only trusts himself. And I think that no matter what I do, it isn't good enough. Well, that worked really well. You can imagine, because he's like, you're not good enough. And I'm like, you're right, I'm not. But, so at some point, the pain, it was like painful. And I went to God, I know this is of you. And often we get led down a path that we know is of God. And at first it doesn't look good. Well, this wasn't looking good. And I said, I need something to hold on to, a verse or something. And this thought came, all will be made whole as a result of this marriage.
Wow.
And, when Christ used the word whole, it meant not just physical healing, but spiritual and emotional healing. Mm-hmm. You can imagine, like the 10 lepers were healed. One came back and thanked him, and he said, you've been made whole. There's a difference. And so, well, I wanted that. And so it was like I say, the first promise got me into the marriage, and the second kept me there. And so it's how we work things out. And at the end, we have this happy marriage. We just celebrated our 26th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
And I say to the kids, how did it impact you? And they will say, oh, this and this. They all have a different reason. But that your marriage made a difference to me.
Wow.
So that was a hard book to write, because a lot of it was painful, and yet it all turned out great. So you're like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes. Now, and if you don't mind, your first husband, do you communicate with him? You forgave him for kind of interrupting your life?
Yes. And I mean, the children are like in their 40s now. The youngest just turned 40. So I'm just aware of him. I don't have any animosity towards him. We showed up at weddings together and family dinners and barbecues. We're fine. We're fine.
That's fine. That's good. That's very good, because that to me could be very traumatic from my point of view. That could be very traumatic. So that's a wonderful thing as well. So now you have a website called inhisfootsteps.com, correct? Yes. And so
it has the books on there, and a small newsletter sign up, because the third book I just finished writing. So it'll probably be about a year before it's actually out in print. So I have links to the books. I have them available as print books, ebooks, and audiobooks. So however you like to listen to your books. Yeah. And that's
wonderful. And we'll have all of that information in the podcast show notes, as well as in the video description box on the YouTube channel. Well, Margaret, I will say to you, thank you so much. I do believe.
Can I just say one more thing? People understand the difference between an autobiography and a memoir. And so an autobiography starts with, like my grandparents came, like that, right? That's sort of how they start. And you get your whole life in there. But a memoir is a slice of life. So as I said, I think of these three memoirs as different slices of the same life. And so Anne Lamott and Danny Shapiro have all written multiple memoirs. So that's what's happening here.
Wow.
So
I'm glad you clarified that. I think a lot of people needed that information.
because a lot of people think they want to write a memoir, but there's so much. So it's like, well, write it all if you want, but then split it out into topics.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good idea. Good idea. So, but anyway, thank you so much again, Margaret. I do believe that this podcast will be a blessing or clarification or enlightening to someone out there. And we just need to turn it all over to him. Thank you so much.
Thank you.